Coupled with the poor vaccination effort at home is the poor vaccine distribution abroad. President Biden had promised to share millions of vaccines with the rest of the world. However, the agency given that task is now claiming that it's broke and can't do it. Politico reported that USAID was given $1 billion to help transport COVID vaccines to other countries, but half that money was then spent on additional Pfizer doses that won't be available for months. And in the meantime, USAID officials argue they will struggle to help countries secure resources to distribute the shots and obtain COVID drugs and personal protective gear. Also, still no movement at the World Trade Organization for a COVID vaccine IP waiver. Although the U.S. claims to support the waiver, Washington isn't applying any pressure on the EU to end its holdout opposing the measure. So many non-Western countries continue to struggle to acquire life-saving COVID vaccines. That's the case right now in Vietnam, where MMN correspondent Luna Oy has more.
Hi, this is Luna Oy reporting from Da Nang, Vietnam. As you well know, pretty much every nation in the world right now is racing to vaccinate as many citizens as possible against COVID-19. And right now, Vietnam is trying to pull ahead in that race. As we have reported previously here on Means TV, Vietnam has been taking COVID-19 very seriously since the very beginning. Vietnam was one of the first countries to have a lockdowns for COVID-19, and the infection and death rate from COVID-19 in Vietnam has been one of the lowest per capita to date. Unfortunately, right now, Vietnam is having one of its worst outbreaks to date, centered around Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam's most populous city. The highly contagious Delta variant of the virus has spread rapidly throughout Ho Chi Minh City, and the government has now put in place strict lockdowns and ramped up food distribution to take care of the population. The government and the people are working closely with each other to distribute food for free to everyone in need. But to ensure long-term victory over COVID-19, Vietnam will have to roll out mass vaccination programs. And on July 10th, Vietnam just launched our biggest vaccination campaign. We intend to have 70% of the population of Vietnam vaccinated by the end of this year, and all vaccinations for Vietnamese citizens will be completely free. Unfortunately, when it comes to obtaining vaccines, Vietnam is facing many hardships, mostly due to vaccine nationalism. Vietnam has signed contracts with many vaccine companies around the world, and these companies have promised to send 124 million doses by the end of this year. But so far, Vietnam just received 8 million doses for the population of 97 million. Meanwhile, wealthy nations like the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada have hoarded more vaccines than they could possibly use, even though each of them already vaccinated around 50% of their populations. And 1 out of every 850 doses of vaccine in the USA alone are being wasted. But the real issue is not simply a lack of imported vaccines to Vietnam. Unfortunately, key nations are refusing to waive the patents on vaccines, hampering our ability to produce doses locally. Last year, in October 2020, India and South Africa proposed a temporary waiver on COVID-19 medical tools and technologies. 58 countries sponsored the proposal, and more than 100 countries agreed to sign. But there are still many key countries that are obstructing these patent waivers, including Australia, Japan, South Korea, and most of Europe. Vietnamese government officials have been working around the clock to try to purchase vaccines anywhere they can be obtained to vaccinate our people. About a week ago, Vietnam received 2 million doses of Moderna from the U.S. government. And prior to that, Vietnam had already received about 8 million vaccine doses, mostly from the International COVAX Sharing Facility. Vietnam has also had meetings with Cuba and Russia. Russia is currently considering providing Vietnam with the technology to manufacture the Sputnik vaccine domestically. Meanwhile, Cuba has already agreed to transfer technology to produce their Abdala vaccine in Vietnam. Cuba also said they are willing to make more COVID vaccines and send them to Vietnam if needed. Evidence for the deep ties of mutual aid and support which Cuba and Vietnam have long shared. Perhaps the most hopeful news of all, Vietnam already has 3 domestic vaccines under development. 2 of these domestic Vietnamese vaccines are in the testing phase, and one is still being researched. Both of the vaccines under testing are showing good results, and we estimate that by the end of this year, Vietnam will officially begin administering our first domestic vaccine. Vaccine imperialism and vaccine nationalism have become a threat all over the world, as wealthy nations hoard vaccines for themselves, refuse to share patents and technology, and fail to honor their pledges and contracts with poorer and smaller nations. What these wealthy nations need to realize is that failure to spread the vaccine as far and wide as possible puts the entire world at risk, including their own home countries. Because as long as COVID is spreading anywhere, the chances increase everywhere that new strains and variants of COVID-19 will mutate into existence, which, as we are seeing with the Delta variant, could affect everyone everywhere. Vietnam is fortunate to have the capability to produce vaccines domestically, but there are far too many poorer and less technologically developed countries out there that cannot do anything but wait for mercy from the rest of the global community. This is Luna Nguyen in Da Nang, Vietnam. Back to you, Sam.